The 1980s, Iran and Iraq fought in one of the longest wars of the 20th century. It became the most destructive military conflict since World War II. More than a million people lost their lives, and the total cost of it, to date, may exceed $300 billion. The increasing economies of Iran and Iraq are seriously damaged, and a full recovery from war will take more than a decade. The origins of this war are mainly geopolitical, with territorial, political, economical, and social issues. There are people who state that the primary cause was a dispute about the 105-kilometer-long Shah al-Arab boundary, and the others contend that this dispute was the pretext for the escalation of hostilities of other non-territorial sorts. After decades of fights between both countries, they were threatened by the Islamic State, ISIS, a thing that made them get together to fight against them. And now that ISIS is almost gone from Iraq, Iran has taken advantage of this situation, and with national elections coming up, its influence is only growing.
So now let's take a look inside the borders of the conflict with this interview by our journalists Ana Rosa and Habib Al-Shabab. Now the floor is open.
Hi, Mr. Habib. It is a pleasure having you here to talk about the terror that has been happening in the Middle East. First, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Thanks for the invitation. Well, I am Irani and I am 50 years old. I have been living in Iraq since I met my wife 22 years ago, and since then we formed a beautiful family, which is composed of my beautiful wife and 3 sons that are 19, 10, and 8 years old. Just that the boy of 19, Khalid, since he became an adult, he became part of the Iraqi popular mobilization units to fight against ISIS. But you know, what is complicated, and I have not known about him in a while. My wife, well, she has not overcome that yet, you know? He was our first child.
It is so hard to hear about that, Mr. Habib. We hope you can know something more about your son. And now, continuing with the interview, tell us about which are the actors involved in this conflict.
Well, there are 3 principals: Iraq, Iran, and ISIS, which also have allies like Russia and United States. But we will only focus on the 3 principal ones. The first country, Iraq, has been damaged by the attacks of ISIS. It became like the battleground between the United States and Iran, and it is having elections nearby also. The second country involved, Iran, has as his main purpose dominating Iraq by having an influence in diverse aspects such as military, political, economic, and cultural affairs. And last but not least, the final actor is ISIS, the Islamic State, which is the most successful jihadist military group ever known, with strongholds in both Iraq and Syria. And their goal is to kick America out of their wanted territory, obtain more control over land, and create their own nation with a strict Sharia law.
Well, you were talking about Iran wanted to dominate Iraq by influencing in different aspects. Tell us, which is their purpose?
Well, first you need to know that there are a lot of ideological similarities between some groups living in Iraq with Iranians. So, the location that Iraq has gives to Iran the possibility to use the country to control a corridor from Tehran to the Mediterranean, have a better communication and relation with their allies like Yemen and Gaza, and to continue its fight against the United States and ISIS.
And tell us, which are the methods used by the Iranians?
Well, groups of mainly Shiites have begun organizing themselves to secure even more dominance for Iran over Iraq's political system. By the influence of TV channels set up with Iranian money, which puts Iran as a protector and the United States as a dubious interloper, and by the Iraqis' popular mobilization units, who have been in charge of fighting against ISIS in Iraq's territory, group in which my son is participating.
Finally, to conclude with this interview, tell us, Mr. Habib, which are your predictions? Do you think it might be solved the problem?
Gravity and conflicts will surely continue, as neither countries will want to give in. All the consequences will be for the people, for all of them who will spend on the war and also on the attacks on innocent civilians. No, we already suffer from the lack of security.
I agree completely with you. Thank you so much for being in this interview, Mr. Habib. We appreciate all the knowledge that you have provided us.
Thank you too for having me.